I want to welcome Gabriel Bauman from Exposure Watch. He's built a beautiful new website which helps track COVID-19 exposures in all children's schools in British Columbia. Welcome, Gabriel.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
Tell me a little bit about this new site that you built, Exposure Watch. How does it work, and what was the reason behind building it?
Well, first off, I have kids, and you start to wonder what's actually happening in the schools. It doesn't seem like there's any interest on the part of the authorities for, you know, letting us know what the situation on the ground is. And myself and a few other parents take issue with that. And as you know, we have in BC the COVID School Tracker, a Facebook group that's been collecting information, confirmation letters, anecdotes, anything they can to try and collate all that information and make it public. But the problem with that is that it was based on a Facebook group, and there are plenty of people, myself included, who aren't really on Facebook, don't really have time to go digging every day to see if there were exposures or not. You're taking the kids to school, you're bringing them home. Who's got time to go dig? So the idea was, let's take that information and make it useful to the most people possible. Let's push the notifications out to people. Let's send them a text message. Anybody can get a text message these days. So that was the general idea. That's why we ended up building it.
So I want to touch on that. You said you can get text messages from your site. How does that work? I go to your site and look for a school, and I can just sign up for any school I want?
Yep. So we've got pretty much every school in BC in the database. I think there are some different kinds of institutions, maybe a couple in jails that aren't there, but they will be added shortly. But yeah, if you're in a private or public school in BC, your school should be there. Your kid's school should be there in the database. You just go search, find the page for that school, bookmark it. And then you have the option on that page of texting and a phone number to subscribe to notifications for that school. So we'll let you know when there's an exposure at the school. And the page also gives you a red, yellow, green status for the school. If there's been an exposure in the last 2 weeks, status is red. The last 4 weeks, status is yellow. Nothing in the last 4 weeks, status is green. Maybe that's okay, maybe not. But at least you know that there isn't an ongoing outbreak that anyone is aware of right that second. So hopefully it gives people a little bit of peace of mind.
Will it also touch on the post-secondary institutions as well?
Yeah, I've been working with the UBC COVID Tracker, who is a student, and they are staying anonymous, so we won't be talking about their identity or who they are. But they have their own reporting kind of mechanism, and they are collecting confirmed reports as far as I can tell. So the only reason they're not in the system yet is just a matter of time. I haven't had time to get UBC into the database. I haven't had time to automate the pulling of stats from them yet, but that's coming. It's number 4 on the list right now.
And building the airplane while flying, they say.
I jumped off a cliff and now I'm assembling a parachute, more like.
That's about right. And would you say that you can see this site growing then beyond the post-secondary institutions in the future? How do you really envision the site growing from here?
Yeah, so the idea is that, we're in this funny time. There's all these different movements. People are mad about the government vaccine pass, and people are angry about having to, do contact tracing or whatever at restaurants. And the reality is the people who care about it are going to care about it, and the people who don't aren't. But I think what's interesting about this is what I've actually built ends up being a pretty effective contact tracing mechanism. And it's a database of places. It's a database of people who are interested in those places. And it's not a very big step to get to people reporting that they were at that place on a certain day. So what I would like to do with this is make it so that anyone can add a place to be monitored, and anyone can report against any place. We can still ask for confirmation. We don't want people lying about exposures to target a business, for instance. So we'll take measures to prevent that. But also to give businesses in particular an easy mechanism for doing voluntary contact tracing. Hang a sign on the door, If you enter the business and scan the code, then you're just saying I was here today. And then anyone can also report, I was sick and I was at this business on this day. And we can send the notifications out. It's the same mechanism we're using for schools, just with an extra scan for people who are showing up. So that's where I'd like to take it, is people who are interested will participate. Businesses can offer it as an option with no judgment. People either can use it or not. If you want to know about COVID exposures while you're here on this day, just scan the code. So I think it's a service that makes sense for business people. It's kind of apolitical, use it or don't use it. There's no government weight behind it. There's no personal information. Your phone number is not really personal information. You have to give out your phone number for it to be useful. We don't collect names. And that's what a lot of businesses were doing in the last year for contact tracing, was just collecting phone numbers on a scrap of paper when you walk in, right? And then they throw them out after a while. So, I think we can do the same thing, without really asking too much of people or giving people too much to be angry about, and it might help.
Yeah. And so to circle back onto the schools then, do you see that the government has put out some new exposure notification system for different health authorities? I wonder what you think of these, if you've seen them, and whether you think they will be useful to be used as an input into Exposure Watch.
Well, yeah, that is actually the plan. We'll take any bit of information that we can automate the intake of, we'll ingest it, and we'll use it to inform people. That's what the role of the site is. I think what's interesting about it is just how pathetic the government effort is. I'm one guy with a day job, and I've spent about 40 hours building Exposure Watch. The government has people on salary, 40 hours a week, doing code for various systems, building this and that. The health authorities have web people. There are all these salaries, and the best they can come up with is, a really poorly thought out set of not even notifications. They're just posting some exposures that they deign to tell us about, and they're doing it in such a way that isn't even chronological. It's not like they're putting a history of exposures on their website. They just say, oh, there's an exposure within the last week, and then it vanishes a week later. This is the same thing they did last year. It was extremely frustrating. It's no wonder no one goes to look at the exposures except for reporters. It's no wonder that people were tracking in spreadsheets, just trying to make heads or tails of it. Last year, I had a bot that would go visit the Fraser Health website, take a snapshot, and then I would use a developer's tool called diff every week to figure out just what they had, added or removed. And after a while, I had to run that daily because they were twiddling things and adding things and removing things on a daily basis, and it didn't make any sense. So automating the intake from these will even be difficult. It's just so poorly done.
And they don't even,
you think that, okay, it's public health. You'd think they'd have a robust IT solution. You'd think that they would have robust databases, because they're doing, COVID is the latest thing, but these people have been doing infectious disease tracing for many different diseases for years. You'd think that they would know what they were doing. Well, all I see is incompetence. And it's absolutely a travesty that they're allowed to get away with this, and that I guess we'll start telling you again because people seem a bit worried. So we'll go back to our useless reports on the website. I'm just infuriated by this. There is no excuse.
Absolutely
not.
So
bad. It is so poorly done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's insulting to be told, we're not telling you what we know. You just put your head down and go to work and forget about it.
Yeah, I take issue with that as well. It's pretty disturbing to see that these people that we pay with our taxes, we expect them to manage things for our, they have to look at population level trends. Absolutely. That's part of the job when you're in public health. Right? And you're going to break some eggs. Not everyone is going to be equally benefited by a public health policy. I just don't see how that's possible. You can't make a policy that doesn't have winners or losers. But this patronizing kind of, you can't know, we can know, we're going to just sit on the data and there's nothing you can do. That's disturbing to me. And I think you're well familiar with some of that.
A little bit, and you're a part of this. We can talk about that if you'd like. We're trying to access through a mass coordinated effort all of the different exposure notifications, single cases, including clusters or outbreaks, if they are ever declared an outbreak. As you know, they are at the mercy of the provincial health officer of whether she'd like to declare the outbreak. And we want every single case record, including those that have been withheld. And we've asked this of nearly every single school district within the Ministry of Health's purview of their communications between them and those various districts. Well, we haven't yet, as you know, as a participant in this project, Gabriel, you're doing your home district.
Yeah.
And I'm doing one in on the island, Cowichan Valley. And
exposures today.
Yes. But we wouldn't have known yet from the government because they're not responding to our requests. They're saying, we've got your letter, but that's it.
Yeah, I haven't even received a response to my letter, which has been copied now to multiple people in the Freedom of Information department. It's been copied to Bonnie Henry. And they must get a lot of mail. But this is an important part of government. I mean, the Freedom of Information legislation that we have is very specific, and we have filed under what's called Section 25. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Section 25 deals with matters that are of health and safety and environmental risk. So I actually have it written here, and it's whether or not, and that's a really big part, whether or not a request has been made. So it's right there. It says that it's up to the government, that it's their requirement to put this stuff out when there's a risk to any kind of bodily harm or risk to your health or safety. So anyway, whether or not a request for access is made, the head of a public body must, without delay, disclose to the public, to an affected group of people, or to an applicant information about a risk of significant harm to the environment or the health and safety of the public or a group of people, or b, disclosure of which for any reason is clearly in the public interest. And I reckon that COVID-19 is in the public interest, but really the key here is Section A, Section A of Section 25. There's a chance that you could get hurt by this virus. There's a chance you could be killed by this virus or your children.
So, in other words, we should have some kind of a response.
Absolutely.
I have been speaking to other people who are involved in this, and they are not receiving responses. I personally have not received a response. I haven't even received a thank you for your submission. We'll be in touch. I haven't got a call from an officer. All the things that I was told I could expect to happen eventually have not happened. I've mentioned it to reporters that I've spoken with and said, hey, how does this go? Because, reporters are pretty familiar with freedom of information requests often. And I've heard from them as like, oh, well, they get jammed up, they get busy, but you generally know. You generally hear back. So I don't know what's going on, but it is very interesting that a couple of days after we sent the requests, suddenly they're talking about, I think 2 days later, Bonnie Henry was right up there at the press conference saying, oh, well, parents are pretty anxious about this.
Yeah.
Kind safe. But we're going to start releasing the information.
So we had publicly announced the project to the greater whole. There was a sort of a smaller group of people who were working on it. And then we decided, let's blow it up. And so I put out a small blog post on the Safe Schools Coalition BC website, which you can get to at kidsbeforecovid.com. And literally the next day, 24 hours later, in the next news release or the news programming from Bonnie Henry, they had, yes, as you said, had heard from parents finally after we had papered their desks with Section 25 citations over the COVID exposure notices that they'd taken away from us. So I find it a little bit coincidental at the very least, and possibly directly informative of that. I don't want to take credit for it because obviously a lot of people.
I think there's some credit to be taken there, Mike.
Yeah.
The reality is it's kind of amazing to see what moves the government and what doesn't. It's almost like they have a few inputs that work, and everything else is just taken under advisement as kind of like, oh, some of the public think this, but we're going to ignore that and spin it this way. And there's very little sort of requirement that they respond to anything. What's really concerning to me right now is this thing that, again, some of the reporters I've spoken with are complaining about is the total clampdown on press conferences and question asking. You see these press conferences, it's one question and a follow-up. And there's no time limit on the response. There's no requirement that they actually answer the question. All the usual sort of political games. And now we're seeing other government agencies starting to adopt this one question, one follow-up, and then go away kind of an attitude. And that's anti-democratic. That's not anything we should be seeing.
It's fundamentally bad for the press. And they also turn the microphones off of the reporters in between. So you can't even interrupt to say, pardon me, but that's not the question I had asked or anything of the sort. And
if you gang up with the other reporters, they just figure it out, shut you down, move to the next one, and then you're not invited back. There's no there's absolute control as to who gets to speak, and if it's not a favorable question, then you're less likely to get a chance to ask another question in the future. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah. So now it's become up to people like you and like others involved with Safe Schools Coalition BC in a roundabout way as volunteers to get together and do mass projects like this, or it's up to you with Exposure Watch to do the work of a government and build a site that is more efficient in letting people know where there are exposures, how many there are, and actually give them a chance to be alerted to these things to their phone if they choose to be. So
yeah, and really what you hear from the government, at their press conferences is, oh, but we're the authoritative ones, and that's the sort of insinuation, is that somehow the parental projects are less official, less trustworthy, less useful. Well, I beg to differ. We're more useful. These are real people who are trying to look out for their kids who are, reporting these events. We're not epidemiologists. We would have expected the professionals to be, taking the field here, but there's nobody on the field. All there is demand for information. We've had more than 40,000 individual users in 48 hours. We've been processing 10 searches per second or we had a peak there where it was like 10 or 15 searches a second for a while. The servers were screaming. I built the thing to take some demand spikes, but I wasn't ready to launch. It leaked. And then suddenly we were off to the races, and you don't try and put the lid back on that. You're just hurting yourself. So you go with it. So it was imperfect when it launched. It's still fairly imperfect. But my tax dollars should be paying for this. The professionals should be running this. They should be blowing anything that one guy can do in his off hours just completely out of the water. And they're not. They're not even trying.
If they want to be the authoritative source, then they have to do better than these blanket exposure notices that covered multiple, sometimes dozens of exposures with a single, one sentence that shows you a chunk of dates.
And we're also seeing schools writing parents saying, we've had an exposure, we can't tell you when, we can't tell you where, we're not allowed to because the Ministry of Health won't allow us to. And we're seeing that. There was the COVID Tracker posted a link to a district letter where they were basically saying, we're not allowed to tell you, we're telling you everything we can tell you, and it's not very much.
Unbelievable.
What is even going on here? And why are people dealing with it? So one of my big hopes here is that, we're gaining all of this contact with parents who care, and people who care need to get together here. So, we have this audience, Exposure Watch users. I'm hoping that this keeps rolling, that, it keeps building, and that we can leverage the audience of people who care into action. Because, nobody knows what to do. Everyone is very busy. Everyone has kids. If you've got kids, it's really hard to organize into a powerful political force because you've got kids and they need food and they need a bath and they're angry at you because, you didn't give them the toy they want. Whatever it is. Bedtime was an ordeal tonight here, as it often is. And, who's got time to be in a political movement? But it seems to me that one of the groups with the least voice in the province appears to be parents. There's very little organization. We have the PACs, which are very political and very controlled and very slow to react to anything. Where is that parental voice? Where is that organization? Why don't parents, like when I have kids, why am I not signing up to the parents union or something else, some organization that, is parent supporting parents that, has some benefits for being a part of it, and that, has a wing that goes to bat for all families in the halls of power. We need that. We don't have that. And it's my aim to get us there.
That sounds like an ambitious project outside of all of the exposure watch stuff and everything else you've been working on. The Hepa filtration boxes that you were trying to spearhead into New West, and all the work you've been doing.
That was a cluster. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at how I'm amazed at people coming out and saying, we could go over and above the letter of the law here and on safety for kids, but we're not required to. And Stephanie Higginson, the president of the, The
Trustees Association.
The Trustees Association, right. So she goes out there and she's on video saying, we don't have to do better.
I want to challenge the notion that we should be going above and beyond. This is the quote.
Yeah, I mean, that's the quote. I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember it exactly, but it was just, it boggled my mind. I just about fell over. This is a professional person in a highly ranked position, basically out in support of mediocrity.
Yeah.
And she's standing up strong and saying it on video. I just don't get it. How is that acceptable? She should be a laughingstock. In some circles, she is.
Yeah. Well, you do and say interesting things when you have political ambitions, I think. And sometimes you get locked into positions that make you look like quite the fool. And I wonder if that's happening to Stephanie Higginson, president of the BC.
I can't imagine what pressure she must be under and from which quarters she must be under. Same with the principal, like the fellow that is the superintendent here, Kareem, is a nice guy. It's just that the policies that he's okay with just don't make any sense to me. He's more interested in keeping the principals all in line, and the principals are all very deferential to the superintendent.
The Minister of Education is elected out of New West, Jennifer Whiteside. So
I met her during the campaign leading up to that. There was a candidate here that I was polling for, Ruby, who I thought would have done a much better job, but suddenly this Minister of Education was kind of airdropped into a safe riding, and out of nowhere, suddenly Whiteside had the NDP support here, and it was unfortunate.
Via acclamation?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember the actual circumstances actually, but it's one of those situations where there were multiple people who put their name in the hat, and then like the favored candidate dropped in, and that was that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, Ministry of Education's out of here. She is completely unresponsive to anything other than feel good news. Occasionally she drops something totally disconnected into social media. I don't think she even is actually on the social media. I don't think she bothers to try and engage with people. And every time I walk by her office, it's closed. So over that political life, right?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Thanks for your tax dollars. Yeah. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for making this website. It's an absolute dream come true of what I would have wished to have seen on somewhere within the BC government websites. And it's just a real work of art, as I've said. And again, thanks so much for making that thing.
No problem. It was worth it. It's nice to see it. Like even as a software engineer, it's just nice to see something that you put out there get used by a wide swath of society. At my day job, it's all bank clients and other such things. We make services behind the scenes, deep on the back end, and it's working. You know that almost everybody that is using your stuff in some way or another.
Yeah.
But you don't get to see people actually react to it. And it's been a real pleasure to make something that's immediately useful to everyone and isn't just some weird abstract exercise, buried under layers of tech.
Yeah. So and it matters to you, and it matters to all of us parents and their children, I'm sure, as well, to have a heads up.
Yeah,
So,
and what's funny is my kids came home today and were like, "Dad, the teachers say that you were on TV," and yeah, I got recognized on the street down here the other day, which was kind of an interesting thing. I guess people watch CTV News, so
hey, good for you. Good for
yeah,
you.
it's nice. Thanks.
Right on. Well, I'll talk to you soon, Gabriel. Thanks so much for your time.
No problem. See you later.